Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming to this session. My name is Rihanna. I am a PhD student here in the School of Public Health. And welcome to the symposium and to this session on urban fisher folk, recreational exposures, and health disparities. So this session is going to talk a little bit about the environmental hazards, including the legacy pollution sites, coal-fired power plants, heavily trafficked roadways in Washington, D.C. and Maryland that influence pollution that occurs on the Anacostia River. So we have a panel here of 4 great speakers who are going to talk to us about subsistence fishing, recreational exposures, health disparities on the Anacostia River. So first, I guess we can just go in order how we're sitting. So first we have Jorge Bogatis Montero, and he works at the Anacostia Watershed Society. And he's a great partner of mine in the project study, which he will talk about this morning. So overview of the Anacostia watershed. So we're in the Anacostia watershed right here. So we're in College Park, and our headquarters is here in Bladenburg. This is the main stem of the river. So we're talking about 176 square miles, about 440 square kilometers. More than 1 million people live in this watershed. So it's a mostly urban watershed, and it includes 3 jurisdictions: Montgomery County, Prince George's County, and DC, the eastern half of DC. Some facts about the watershed is 75% of the watershed is developed. Lots of residential areas, but also commercial, and lots of impervious surfaces, around 40%. And at least on the Maryland side, at least 60% of the streams lack an adequate riparian forest buffer of 100 feet or so, which has a direct effect on the water quality through, sediment pollution and other kinds of pollution. There's been 95% of wetland loss. First, beginning in the 1800s, when they started destroying wetlands, they were malarial swamps. So they dredged them and filled them in the DC side. They built the seawall to make it more navigable. So they pretty much disturb the hydrology of the wetlands. So there's more than 2 billion gallons of raw sewage and stormwater overflow reaching into the river every year. Again, this has tremendous impacts on the water quality and the aquatic organisms like fish. And there's an estimate of 20,000 tons of trash and debris that enter the main stem of the river every year. Also, a recent study by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service found that about 30% of brown-coated and catfish have liver tumors or skin lesions related to toxins. And I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here, but some of us know about the impacts of storm water in a highly urbanized watersheds like the Anacostia, and the sewage, CSO system from DC, leaking pipes from on the Maryland side, mostly sediment coming from construction sites, toxics that like I said, there's a lot of impact on the brown bullheads and other fish species, trash, thermal pollution also. There used to be trout many years ago, 100 years ago, in the upper reaches of the watershed. Now there's only, there used to be brook trout, now there's only brown trout in the main branch. But mostly because of the thermal pollution and other water quality aspects, it's pretty much inhabitable for the brook trout, the native trout. Nutrient pollution as well. And we have 6 famous hotspots, Superfund sites along the Anacostia River. And of course, this has direct impact on the fish communities. Well, a little bit on the demographics. As you can see, this is data for the county, not for specific for the Anacostia watershed. But you can see that the minorities are majority in mostly all the jurisdictions of the Anacostia watershed. So we partner with the Anacostia River Keeper and some donors like the NOAA, EPA, and others to understand fishing in the Anacostia River. So we hired Opinion Works, a consulting firm, to help us with that. They conducted interviews along the river with the anglers, and we came up with this report, which is available online, addressing the risk, understanding and changing anglers' attitudes about the dangers of consuming Anacostia River fish. So some of the interesting findings in this study is that they are pretty diverse, as I show you in the demographics. This is a very urban area, very diverse area, so that's reflected in the anglers, and 67% of the folks interviewed were African American, 18% Hispanic, 8% Asian, and 6% white. Actually, to be honest, it was the Hispanic population and perhaps the Asian were kind of underrepresented, because a lot of the sampling in this study was focused on the DC side. It is very interesting to note when there's Hispanic folks on the DC side, but it's mostly African Americans. Once you cross the line, you go to the Bladensburg Waterfront Park, Colmer Manor Park. There's a lot of Latinos there that use that area. So that's something we're trying to do with the studies we're engaged following, and I'll talk more about those. Normally our anglers have low education attainment, and they fish on a regular basis. That's something we found. And they are mostly bottom fishers, so they are going for, using the big poles with big lead sinks. So they use normally fish livers, sausage, and shrimp. So they are targeting the bottom feeders, so the channel catfish, blue catfish, brown bullheads. And as we're going to see, those are kind of the more risky to consume because of how they accumulate these toxins. And again, 65% of the anglers reported catching channel catfish, and then the second most common was brown bullheads. 22% of the anglers are unaware of the risks of consuming fish, and this goes even higher for the Hispanic population, 53%, which shows, the kind of the impasse there in communication between the fish consumption advisories and how this message gets conveyed into the non-English speaking population. 24% don't have a fishing license, which is, a whole other kind of worms that we're not going to discuss today. And 1 in 5, 21% of anglers either share everything they catch. And we have a lot of interesting stories in this study, how one folk was fishing there, and there was this old lady with a tear in her eye, just waiting for him to give him his catch. Because these are people that really are living poverty. This is a typical scene. This is on the confluence between the northwest and northeast branches of the Anacostia, pretty much where the Anacostia River starts, south of here in the Hyattsville area. So you can see some Latino folks with families. It's not uncommon to see families, like Latino families, having a picnic, and the kids will be swimming, or the adults will be swimming in the river, because they don't know about the risks of you know, being in contact with that kind of contact with the water. And you know, there's all kinds of anglers. This guy was in the upper northeast branch of the Anacostia, and he's great at catching snakeheads, and he eats them as well. But yeah, I was surprised about how successful he is in catching snakeheads. I've been trying for 2 years without any success. Yeah, and that's an interesting species, because it's an introduced invasive species from East Asia, and it is supposed to be safer to eat than the bottom feeders, the catfish or the eels, because they eat mostly other fish from the middle of or upper water column. And according to some preliminary tests, tissue tests, maybe Dr. Miller might have some more information about it, they have found that the PCBs and PAHs and those kind of toxins, the levels are similar to that of the largemouth bass. The thing is that this grows bigger. So as a general rule in fish, the bigger they grow, the more pollutants they accumulate. So it might be a better alternative, but that's kind of blurry. That there's a question mark there. Because they burrow in the mud in the winter, so that also might make them very exposed to these chemical compounds in the sediment. 18% of the anglers interviewed were Latinos, and again, both anglers, 53% Spanish speakers are unaware of the health risks. Again, the message of fish consumption advisory is just not getting there. And mostly there's lack of fisheries management in the countries of origin. They come from, you know, Honduras, Guatemala. I mean, there's no license there to buy, or if there is something like only on paper, nobody does it. So they don't have fish consumption advisories, or you know, they might be from places that really don't have a lot of pollution issues. If you go to the, you know, in Guatemala, it's in the middle of the rainforest. It's relatively pristine, and there's a lot of areas like that. So, all in all, there's an ignorance of these kind of issues, fish management, licensing, fish consumption advisories, because of the places they come from, and catch and release. It's kind of like a weird idea for that people. Yeah, catch and release. People think that's kind of weird. There's no concept of catch and release. You catch a fish is for eating, and if you land like a big snakehead like those, it's going to the table because people have, you know, their protein needs. Again, the risk of eating a snakehead is still kind of a question mark. Perhaps we can discuss it further today. And the anglers are very interested in fishing as an activity. That's something we found. They want to see more events where they can learn more about these things, but they can also share the knowledge about fishing. Because, you know, and anybody that fishes, they know that it's a fun activity, and you always want to talk to other buddies about that. And then we got this grant from CBT about subsistence angling outreach, and what we tried to test the messaging targeted to the subsistence anglers, saying that you know, let's try to not eat catfish and try to only keep snakeheads, perch, bass, and other species. It was kind of a pilot program, although the funding was reduced for some reasons. So it was very limited actually with this project. So we want also to disseminate information about the fish consumption advisories and alternative fishing practices. We gave away some buckets like that, cedar fish, and with the sticker on, and some lures so that, you know, you would use to catch those other species. We had some fishing events where we taught people how to use the lures, because something that I've seen when they might buy them, but they don't know how to use them to catch a perch or bass or other species like that. And then there's Project Caesar that I'm sure we're going to talk more about it. The community-based assessment of exposures to substances in the Anacostia region. That was in partnership with Smithsonian Institution, University of Maryland, District Department of the Environment, and who else? That's all right. Sorry. And we did public fishing events where we collected tissue samples, and we allowed the public to participate in collecting tissue samples that we sent to Dr. Miller for analysis. And honestly, there was a kind of, we didn't quite get the kind of target public, the subsistent anglers, those middle-aged men that are catching and eating all those fish. We got mostly families, so it was a great opportunity to teach kids, but it wasn't quite the right target population we were looking for. And as you can see, this brown bullhead is the only one of the only native catfish in the river. Perch, blue cats, and then you can see that the kids had a lot of fun. And something we do at the Anacostia Watershed Society, we engage thousands of people through volunteer events, doing hands-on work. Our Earth Day cleanup, we normally have up to 2,000 people. So it's a great opportunity to bring people to the river and engage them in our mission. We have pontoon boat tours, not only through environmental education programs where a lot of people from minorities participate, but also more for community leaders, public officials. And then we have our very successful paddle nights, which are free paddling events in the summer every week. Anybody can join and get a canoe or kayak. And when I'm around, I always encourage the Spanish-speaking folks to join. It's just a great opportunity to bring them through. Sometimes when they see us there, even if it's free, they assume we have to pay, but there's that language barrier. But once you talk to them, you get involved and you engage them with what we do. And also we're more in a culture of translating signage in our restoration projects, and communications material has been more part of our culture to really engage the minorities. And also partnering with churches, community groups, and low-impact development projects. And also this is a way to reach that demographic that is normally kind of left out. And it's the demographic that is, as you saw, fishing and eating fish from this river. We forgot to say one of the estimate is that 17,000 people are eating fish from the river annually. They are sharing the fish with kids and pregnant women, which are the groups most at risk. So it's really a concerning topic. Do I have time, or can we leave the lessons learned for later? Yeah, okay. So yeah, the regular communication methods don't work. Flyers, for example, with the Latino community are not very successful for cultural reasons and other reasons. So, and again, we found that anglers like those get-together events where they can, with other peers, where they can talk about fishing. But those are great spaces to educate them about the risks of consuming fish, and also to translate communication materials and do this kind of interpreting. You really need bicultural staff that really understand both cultures and languages. In Spanish there's a complex slang. You might be saying a word means something in my country, Costa Rica, and Mexico. It might be offensive. So you really have to understand all these things. And they cut down the text. That's something we found out. They use more symbols. They like to see more symbols and imagery. Not a lot of text, not a lot of reading. And be more direct and concrete. We tried some messaging in workshops, and we used this abstract looking fish, the saying that was saying, you might know what's in the outside, meaning that the fish looks healthy, but you don't know what's in the inside. But the way we put it, it was pretty artsy and abstract. they don't get that should not be used, should be something more direct, literal, and concrete. And also they like to see strong language, because a lot of the folks we interview, you know, there were some African American folks like in the middle age, they say, I mean, I've been fishing here my whole life and I don't have cancer, so that's, you know, that's not true. So they want to see words like cancer and things like that. The problem is that when you work with the regulatory agencies, they can do that. I mean, DVOE or DNR, they cannot use those big words, because, you know, there's a lot of liability and things like politics and things like that. So, and they also like to be called fishermen, not anglers. They see anglers more related to, you know, more professional kind of bass pro and or you know, watermen. They just see themselves as fishermen, the ones that go with a big pole and catch some catfish. And, yeah, so those are some of the things we learned. And again, this is a photo on how we engage people, youth and adults, through different recreational and restoration opportunities. Thank you.
Dr. Thomas Miller, who is the director of the Chesapeake Biological Laboratory, and he's a professor of fisheries and bioenergetics at the University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Excellent.
So thank you very much for coming today. This is a very different audience for me. I'm used to be talking to fish ecologists, and it's only been in the last 5 years since I met Jacoby that I began to think of a world outside of the biology of the fish. So this is from a fish's eye view of the urban fishing and some of the problems, particularly with the Anacostia. So this is just the background, right? These are PCB levels from sediments around the state. The black dots are effectively no PCB contents. The colored circles are where the PCBs were highest. And you can see where they're concentrated. Right? They're concentrated in Anacostia River, although we actually didn't have samples from the DC part, but even just north of the DC line, all down the Potomac, and heavily in the Fort Mill area. So if you ask people where do they go and eat the fish that they catch, there'll be some in the middle of the Chesapeake Bay that are eating striped bass. They're eating 1 meal a month or 2 meals a month. But if you go to the people in the harbour and the Anacostia, as we just heard from Jorge, they're eating fish a lot more frequently.
Just clarification, are these levels in fish?
Sediments.
Sediment.
In the sediments. And so those people are exposed to a much higher risk, and yet the health advisories the state issues 3 meals of striped bass a month are based on a fairly random sampling program. They're not based upon sampling in these environments where the risk is much higher. So why is the risk a lot much higher there? Lots of complex chemistry, which I don't want to bore you with, but we're going to go through this as the example. Right, so we have, you should have listened to Jorge, we have a nice diagram, but it's very conceptual. It's a red fish, it's not a catfish, but you get the idea. This is a fish in this contaminated environment, and it's getting contamination potentially from the water, from the sediments, and when it's eaten by humans, we get this exposure risk and likely health consequences that go with it. So if it were that simple, we would be fine. We could just measure the biomarkers in humans and we'd be good. But the problem is the body burden in the fish varies a great deal. And it varies a great deal because, if we walk into it, as the chemistry changes in the environment, the contaminants the fish exposed to change. So we can go into the sediments and we can measure PCBs and metals, but many of those aren't available to the fish because they're bound to the sediments. And it's only when you get perhaps low oxygen events that some of those metals become mobilized into the water column and some of the organics become overlies. So you think then that the fish uptake that way, right? They're living in a contaminated soup. They must just absorb it through their skins and through their gills. The fact is, most of their consumption comes from food they eat, right? So understanding what the food that they eat is will tell you a lot about which fish are contaminated, which is why the brown bullheads are as heavily laden as they are, and why probably snakehead and largemouth bass are less contaminated. We also need to understand that these fish don't stay in one place. They go through a range of different scales of movement on a daily basis, which may take them in or out of contaminated areas. And then over their life cycle, they're going to go in and out of these areas as well. So it means that there's a great deal more complexity to try and understand what the body burden of those individual fish is. And it's going to be based on their species, which will guide some of those movements. And it will also be based upon the age and the dynamics of that species in that location. In some fish, older fish are more contaminated than others. But in other species, in fact, the older fish have gone out and spent a long period of time outside of the contaminated area, and they've depurated any chemicals that they had in them. So in fact, they're a lot less contaminated than the younger fish that are there. All right, and then on top of that, we've got environmental change, which is probably going to reset the clock and cause us to change all of this anyway. So, what do we do about all of this? And this is a lesson that I've taken from fisheries management. So this is the example I'm going to give you, but I think it applies just as well here. This is the usual way that we think about it. We allow managers and scientists to select objectives. They do a study, they perhaps look at the results and they modify it. They, behind Jorge's head, they present the study results, they develop options, and they make recommendations. And it's only in this last step where they develop options and recommendations that they come to the stakeholders and they say, here are the options. And often they're asking people to choose among options, none of which they like. Right? So you go to these people and say, you can't eat the fish. That's not an option that they like. They need to be given other alternatives. So this kind of approach has often been called invite, inform, and ignore. Because that's very much what happens. Right? They've already made their policy options and recommendations. They're just looking for a rubber stamp. A much better way is actually to make stakeholders involved in every step of the process. And that's one of the goals of the project that you've heard about, Project CETA, where you try and involve stakeholders in those decision-making steps all the time. So, does it work? So this is a project, this is not out of cost here, but this is a project on fisheries management where we worked with a group of fishermen to try and help them manage their concerns. This was the first slide we showed them when we tried to understand how many fish they could catch. Right? So what happens? We have fish are born, little fish grow up to be big fish, they grow bigger, they mature, they produce more little fish. Some die, some get caught. Right? That was the standard. We worked with them over 4 meetings over a year. By the end of the year, their level of sophistication went to that. Right? Because they had been involved every step of the way. At the end of this year-long process, they were just as comfortable at writing that, well, not writing, but understanding what that equation meant and where their knowledge fit into every one of those equations. They were at the point where they could present that back to the management community. And I literally sat there and watched managers' jaws drop as these stakeholders got up and started talking in mathematical terms. Right? So if we engage the community early on, we have a hope of giving them, first of all, viable options that they can understand because they helped set them up, and viable options that we think will resolve some of the problems that they have. So that, and with a couple of closing thoughts, as I said, unique scientific and management challenges, unique patterns of health exposure. Just quickly, I didn't think to put any of the results that we And so I will share them orally. Much lower levels of metals in these fish than we thought, largely because the metals remain bound to the sediments and don't enter the food chain, but much higher levels of PAHs than we expected. So PAHs, polyaromatic hydrocarbons, these are products of combustion that are coming into the system through power plants, through vehicle emissions, through other things. And the brown bullheads had very, very high levels of PAHs tissues. And as I said, a stakeholder centered approach. All right.
Real quick, Dr. Miller, do you mind going back to the slide with the stakeholders?
I would if I could. That one?
Yes. Thank you.
So next up we have Tony Thomas, and Tony is an education program coordinator at the Smithsonian's Anacostia Community Museum, and he is a science resource teacher. He was a former science resource teacher in the DC Public School System.
I'm going to pick up where Jorge left off. I'm a native Washingtonian. I grew up, if you know anything about Washington, D.C., I grew up on Soldiers Home Hill. And I had friends that lived east of the Anacostia River. And so when we would go to visit my friends and their families, many times we would play in the Anacostia River. We would swim in the Anacostia River. This is back in the 50s. And we would fish and do all of these things in the Anacostia River. Our turbidity tests back in the 50s was wading into the river waist high. If we could see our toes, good day, we were going to swim. If we couldn't see our toes, we eased ourselves back out the river. And now you don't see anybody swimming in the Anacostia because the word is out, it's very contaminated and polluted. However, it's not stopping the people from fishing, and this is how Caesar came along to address the study of addressing the risk. And there are some challenges in engaging the fishers. First of all, if you know anything, how many fishers do we have in here? 2. Okay, 2. Okay, 3. You agree? Okay. Well, more hand now, so that's 5. Fishers are sort of reactivists based on knowledge of the fish and how they move and when they move and under the conditions that they move. And so you will see us out on the river early in the morning, okay? When the sun comes high in the sky and the water's warm, you don't see us out because the fish are not going to bite, dig down in the bottom and so forth. You might catch a catfish or 2. When it gets cold, you don't see them that often because we come, set up our poles, bait them, and then we go back. We have several hooks, we have several poles, and we go back and we check wherever there's heat. And an hour or so later, we'll come back and see, you know, what's hit our line. And so, in order to engage the fishers, you have to be a fisherman or fisherwoman and know where they're going to be and when they're going to be, because they're not going to be in, for the most part, the wide open spaces. Jorge and I go down into the brush. There are little paths through the woods that come out in places that nobody knows about except those people that live in that community. And when some outsiders like the immigrants come in and they find these locations, then when we approach them, they start moving away. I was up at the confluence, a picture that Jorge showed you where all the Hispanic and Latino families come and they picnic. That's up there where the Northwest Branch and the Northeast Branch confluence up in Bladensburg, okay? There were a group of Latinos in the river with nets, fishing. Nets were legal, and as I approached them, they waded further into the water. And as I came down and began to wade in the water, they went up the other bank and went out of sight and went into the woods. So I left the area and went back and got in my vehicle. Gave them about an hour. Then I came back, they were back in the river. When they saw me, they immediately made their departure. When we do engage them, and that's where Jorge and I have worked out this partnership, because I don't speak the language, Jorge does. And so when we do engage them, the most common retort that we hear is, well, you know, this river is a whole lot cleaner than the river I grew up on and I've been fishing all my life, and I ate out of that river, so I'm going to eat out of this river. Now the African Americans who live in the community says, hey man, I've been eating out of this river all my life. And nobody in my household has died from the cancers or been affected from the cancers. When you combine that with a lack of grocery stores or places where they can buy fresh fruits and vegetables and meats, they don't have a choice. What we need, there's enough information. I was in a presentation before this, children's health. And the question was asked, how do we address these issues? We address these issues with boots on the ground. We need more boots on the ground engaging the fishers. We need more boots on the ground going into churches, into synagogues, into temples, into mosques. We need more boots on the ground engaging these people that speak their language. There's enough information out there. If we're going to change the behavior and the consumption of the fish by pregnant women and children, nobody seems to care about us old folks, so we just go on anyway. But if we're going to change the behavior, we have to have people who have the time to engage folks. And fishers, we talk a lot. We engage each other. That's part of the joy in fishing. When you're fishing with a partner, you sit down and you talk, you meet somebody new. Or what lures are you using? What bait are you using? And you get these conversations. Well, Jorge and I, when we start engaging people and they see us catching the catfish, the first thing we do is take out a camera and we take a photo of the catfish, we measure the catfish, we weigh the catfish, we check it for lesions or any imperfections that's visible, you know, and then we begin to put the catch and release. Whoa, man, what are you doing? You don't want that? There's nothing wrong with that fish that a little hot grease won't cure. And so these are the attitudes that you only overcome in a direct conversation with somebody. There's probably only been about 3 instances where Jorge and I have seen the same person at the same watering hole. Generally, it's a new group of people every time we show up. And the first year of the project, Jorge and I fished every Friday. I can't tell you how many people we converted, but now that we have the results of the toxicology study, we can be able to say, this is the report that's come back from the fish that you are catching in this river and that you're sharing with your family and friends. These are the results that happen, the health risks that you are being faced with. This is not an easy task, but we need more boots on the ground. So if you know folks who like to fish, How do they get in touch with you? Okay, she'll give you her email address. Okay, but we need more people. We need more people to engage the fishers at all times of the day. So if you know folks that fish or would like to fish or want to fish, yeah, we can show you how to do that. But we need folks to be out on the ground. That's what we need if we're going to change the behavior. Any questions? Short and sweet. Yes, sir.
In terms of enlightenment, shall we say,
Okay.
is there a concerted effort to inform at an earlier age? In other words, the same individuals who are family members, the younger ones are in school somewhere. So are there efforts being approached from that standpoint in terms of educating some of the family members through the school process?
We have not done that, but as a former classroom teacher in Montgomery County, Prince George's County, and DC public school system, I don't know of a curriculum that addresses that issue. And to get that in the curriculum is a mighty mountain to scale.
Yeah, to be honest, we talk about it, but we have been discussing about a program specific for that, because we work with, thousands of school children every year from all the jurisdictions. So that's a great idea, but again, we don't currently have such a program.
Our best success actually comes with out-of-school programs. Classroom teachers don't have a whole lot of leeway in how they teach what they're supposed to teach. Okay, and so if this is going to be introduced to the children, it's going to be through teachers who are conducting after-school programs, clubs, and so forth. That's how initially I think it's going to happen.
Well, I was one of those individuals for 35 years.
Okay. Yes, sir.
When the fishermen tell you nobody in my family ever gets sick, what do you tell them, and what seems to be most effective?
I haven't found anything that's most effective. Okay, I haven't. Because I don't know their family. I just know what people have been sick in my family and my associates and circle of friends. And to tell you the truth, I don't know of anybody in my circle of friends and associates that we can say directly suffers from an ailment that can be related directly to fish that they have consumed. I don't know of any.
And actually, to add more of that, that's why the regulatory agencies don't like to use the word, because even though it's known that PAHs and PCBs might be carcinogenic, but there's not a hard science study that makes the direct link. Okay, these people died of cancer because of consuming fish. There's not such a thing.
If we could get a long-term research project dealing with a specific group of people, then we might have some information and data that we could use to educate the populace. But until that happens, I don't see it happening. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Dion Brown. I am likewise native Washingtonian, and I'm in East River.
Okay.
And along the same lines, I'm wondering, what can you tell people that's so compelling when you get these boots on the ground? Because I've worked on a number of issues that pose a more imminent threat to people, and it always seems to fall on deaf ears. So even if you get these people engaged, what can they tell members of the community that would really strike a chord with them?
I think you have to develop a gift for communicating with these folks. You have to speak their language, so to speak. And then you have to know the data that comes out of the research and present it to them in a way that they can see a connection. And to tell you the truth, it's not going to happen in one setting. You're going to have to be with these people 3-4 times. Say, okay, well, you know, let's do this again. Let's join up and do fishing. You know, let's go after some striped bass. And believe it or not, there are striped bass in the Anacostia River. We caught one, couple of them up in Bladensburg this past year. So you make another date, okay? Let's do this again. But you're going to have to build a relationship. And it's not a one-time shot.
Yeah, I really agree with that. You gotta have that gift, because you really have to understand the culture, which might not necessarily be a country, it might be a region and everything. You might bring a Spanish speaker from an urban area, let's say Mexico City, and this person might not relate very well with people from rural areas of Central America. It's like bringing a New Yorker into a West Virginia community. I mean, there's a lot of things that there's a culture shock there, and unless the person has the gift or has studied anthropology or sociology, or there's not going to be effective communication there.
Well, that notwithstanding, I just established my cred. I've lived east of the river all my life. I am one of those people. I communicate. I know the language. I know the people. I have the relationships. But again, when you address some other issues, you know, it's just hard. It's hard. A hard nut to crack.
It is.
So I still haven't heard a response of what's the message. Just like Jorge said, you know, there's really no smoking gun, or there hasn't been a smoking gun established of causation. So what are you telling the people? Everything's in line. You got the right people, the right scenarios, the right relationships. What's the message?
Yeah, that's actually, we don't have a clear, because again, no fishing, like Dr. Miller said, that's not an option, because people are going to keep fishing. We try to change it, you know, let's move on to these other species, but unfortunately, like I said, we had reduced funds, so we didn't keep going with that one. But some people have talked about other stuff, like exchange. They can go with this fish and get more cleaner fish, or you know, aquaponics, and there's a lot of ideas out there, but nothing. Yeah, we don't really have a solution to the moment.
Can we just get? I'm sorry. Can we get our last presenter, and then we'll have
Finish this.
have a group for discussion after. So our last presenter is Ms. Becky Holland, and she received her master's in photojournalism from the Cochrane College of Art in DC. And her thesis was actually on the Anacostia River and its surrounding community. So she has a really great presentation for us. There you go. Yeah, that one. You're right.
Okay. So I'm very thankful to go last and to have been set up by so much wonderful research and data and everything that is not in my wheelhouse. So thank you. And we learned that the people like to be called fishers and not anglers, but this was for alliteration. I spent about a year and a half just kind of wandering the Anacostia River. I have always been interested in environmental issues and had heard that there was a lot of subsistence fishing going on. And also had heard that, you know, the Anacostia had this reputation as the forgotten river and all of these things that you hear when people talk about the Anacostia. And so I learned that the name actually comes from a term that means village trading center. And those seemed kind of at odds with one another. And so I wanted to, you know, just see for myself who was fishing, what it was like to spend time at the river. So, I mean, my only expertise that I have on this topic is just from listening to people and hearing individual stories and anecdotes. And that is what I'm going to share with you today. So I created, after spending about a year and a half at the Anacostia, I made over 60, 70 visits to speak with different people. And disclaimer, most of that was in DC, in Anacostia Park, Haynes Point, which is, I know, the confluence of the Potomac and the Anacostia, Kenilworth, I went to Bladensburg a few times, but most of my time was in DC, and so I did not experience as much of meeting as many people who were Latino or Asian, but mostly black and white people that were fishing. And just kind of hearing their stories. It took about a year to meet someone who caught and ate the fish that would let me photograph that. So as common as it is, yeah, it was really hard to get someone to kind of open themselves up to that. So I'm going to show you just a little clip of this 10-minute video. I'll show you a few minutes. How's the audio on this? Okay. Oh, wow. Let's see. And this video opens. So my project was also just about the community in general. It wasn't only about fishing. And so I'm going to show you the parts of it that were about fishing, but the setup is a little bit about just the river in general.
Just imagine waking up one day, looking out your window and starting to say, no bad smells, no smoke, no noise, no trash, no crowded playgrounds, basketball courts, or corners loaded with teens. No bad words on the walls and sidewalks, no junk, no muddy waters, no hunger, no poor, no peer pressure, no envy, no name calling, no guns, no fear, no pain, no murder, no drugs, no dead birds because of, no dead grass because of, no dead trees because of, no dead people because of, no place to play because of, clean up, care, help each other, play, go outside and play, run, jump, skip, ride, smile, be happy, be safe. And just imagine being a teen living by the Anacostia River. My name is L.J. Johnson, and I wrote that poem when I was 8 years old.
I learned to swim in the Anacostia River. In Washington, D.C. at that time, the swimming pools were segregated. But I think we had the best end of the deal over here because we could go down to the edge of the river through Watts Branch. We had our little route. We called it our beach. Those were our experiences here in this community, and when I talk to people about that, they say, wow, it sounds like you lived in the country. And to a great extent, this was the rural part of Washington, D.C.
A lot of people fish out here. All up and down this river. You know, you come in underneath the Pennsylvania Avenue Bridge, every day people are there. They got like picnic tables there. They're all year long down there. Of course, the river's been there forever. It is the Anacostia named after the Indians, so you figure the Indians may have been out here, you know.
We fish down all the time. Sometimes we get hungry. We say, all right, we'll put our money together, we'll get the beer, and we'll catch the food. And there it is. And then we had the grill over there smoking ready. Get it out and leave it on the skin on it. Wrap it up with some onion, salt, pepper, and lemon, And then when you put it on the grill, the skin will peel right off onto the spoil, so you don't have to really gut it. This catfish happens, boo. This is catfish happens.
Okay, so that is an example of someone who is not subsistence fishing at all. It's something fun that, you know, they do with their friends, hang out, fish, drink, and that's probably not the problem that you guys are here to talk about, but it's an example of someone who at the same time hasn't heard that it's dangerous to eat the fish. Most of the people that I met and talked to would say things like, oh, I haven't turned green yet, or, you know, so it is that delay of any sort of, they don't feel like they have food poisoning or anything that you would expect to feel if something's making you sick. And so I think that is a hurdle in communicating a message of the fish being bad for you. And for the rest of the time, I'm just going to show you some of the other images from the river. So one of the big problems with the river is that it's not really accessible in a lot of ways. It's really built up, surrounded by highways, which contributes to the runoff and the pollution. That was a picture of the metro driving over it, and I think for a lot of people, the Anacostia isn't really a part of their life because it's so removed. And things like the Riverwalk Trail are helping that. But then once you do, you know, if you're someone that is familiar with how to get to the river and that it's there, I think that there's such a vibrant community of people, and for them, the river is this retreat. It's a peaceful place to go and get away from the city and the problems of life. And so I think that's a really positive thing, and I think that fishing is such a positive aspect of so many of these people's lives. To have a retreat from the city, to have something that they can do with their friends. And so I think that was a really beautiful side of spending this time exploring fishing, was to see what a social function it serves and a community building function. I met this couple underneath the John Philip Sousa Bridge one Friday night, and they were just on fire catching, they probably caught 15 catfish while I was there. And the woman that was fishing told me that, you know, she takes it home and freezes it, and, you know, she makes nuggets or whatever, and they were just having the best time. So, yeah, I mean, I wasn't there telling people that they shouldn't eat the fish, or, you know, I was trying to gauge what their perceptions were. And most of the people that I met who were not purely recreational fisher people were not under the impression that it was bad to fish and cook and eat. And I came into contact with a lot of people who were fishing for recreation, like this man. He was a carp fisherman, and, you know, he's out there in his camo, and he was totally going to throw that back. I think he worked for a government agency, and he was just like, you know, this is his fun, just going out there and fishing. You know, and then there's people out there with their kids fishing, and they were, you know, taking the fish home to eat. There was this group of guys in Anacostia Park. Somebody was out there every single day in the little area by this tree with a radio and food and drinks, and I mean, it's just like their place right by this bridge here. This is all in Anacostia Park. People used a lot of different kinds of bait. Hot dogs were popular. I met this family, and this is a really old photo of the father fishing many, many years ago from the Anacostia, and still that's him in April of 2013, fishing. And the day before I met them, they had caught, I don't know how well you can see this, but a giant catfish, like this big, that they had taken home and frozen to cook. Is that a blue cat?
Yeah.
It was great. So, I mean, and then, you know, you go there and you see all of this trash, but at the same time, like that, it may not be the problem, and that's what a lot of groups are going out and fixing, is like picking up trash, but the trash is not necessarily the root cause of the Anacastia's problems, which are much bigger and much more expensive to fix and much more time intensive, the sediment. So, I don't know what time is like, but this was a little further north, fishing, north, same point. This was right on the trail, the train tracks. This man, Alfonso Wright, was taking this fish, and he said he was going to give it to one of his friends. This is AJ. He is a member of the Seafarers Yacht Club, which is where I met a lot of people who fish recreationally. All those yacht clubs right there.
Seafarers Yacht Club is the oldest African-American yacht club in the country.
Really wonderful group of people. And this man I met, and he told me that he fished and sold the fish to a market. So, you know, he wasn't really taking them home and eating them, but he was selling them. And I included some photos of people working to clean up the river, youth, and there are so many efforts all around DC. It's amazing of people who are coming together to clean the river. And something that I think is really interesting is that the Anacostia Riverkeeper has started Friday night fishing in the summer that's focused on youth. It's free. And they have the rods and the bait, and they invite children to come with their families and catch fish. And then when they catch the fish, the kids want to keep it, and they say, oh, well, we're not going to keep this because, you know, this is not healthy to eat because the river has a lot of toxins in it. And so it's kind of like an educational activity for kids to learn about their river. And there they are throwing fish back. So that's a fun thing every Friday. I think they're doing it again next summer. Friday at Diamond Peak Park. Be well attended. And that's pretty much what I have for you today. So.
I just want to thank all our participants. Start on the hand and.
I'm Hanim Karimi. I manage all of these regulatory stuff that he was talking about. So I'm sort of caught between a rock and a hard place. In one way, we give grants to NGOs to encourage folks to go to the river, get connected to the river. And that way, when I go ask for money, people say, yeah, go take care of Anacostia. We want to be there. On the other hand, we get them there and they get the fish and they eat it. There is no law that says you shouldn't eat the fish. It's an advisory. That's why the term is there that we suggest you don't eat it. And I'm looking for a solution here, some sort of a plan, because I understand that environmental justice is subset of the justice in general, you know, access, jobs, health, money, all of that stuff. But we can just sort of sit here and twiddle our thumb and say we don't have a solution. So somehow we need to come up with some incremental steps that get people from point A to point B somewhere along the road. So I'm just opening up to whomever sits there and think that we can find somewhere.
Project Seeds are incorporated this past summer an incentive for people giving up their catch. We went to Target and we purchased several hundred $10 gift cards that don't expire. And so when we started serving these families this past summer, and someone would catch a fish, we would then take the fish, do the measurement, the data collection of it, and then we would take a tissue sample, send it off to Tom's office, and we would also empty the stomach and show them what the fish had been consuming. We would then give them this $10 gift card, but during the whole process, we're educating these families as to this process that we're going through and why you should only eat a certain amount. And we would pass out the flyers that came from DME, and some of them we had translated as well. So we entered this process. I can't tell you if we made any headway in changing people's behavior and attitude, but at least we've started the process. And since it's an open-ended grant, we're going to continue this over the next several years. So, but we need more folks. We need some boots on the ground, you know. We really need some boots on the ground to help with this process.
Can I just respond as well? I think we will have failed if people stop going down to the river and stop fishing. Right? That's not the goal. The goal is to provide an alternative to those who go down to the river because they need to eat what they catch. Not because the guy that chose to wrap it up in onions and foil and have it with beer. That's not the issue. It's those that are eating the fish from the river because they have no choice. And that's really not a fisheries management issue. It's an economic issue. So the solution to this is an economic solution, not a fisheries issue. We've got to find ways to give people the awareness of the health hazard that is there. But even that's not going to solve it if we're going to put food in. Good point.
Yes, so although it sounds like it's very well documented that sediments in fish have high burdens of contaminants in them, it sounds like there is a data gap, like you were mentioning, as far as the long-term epidemiological studies of whether consumption is actually related to disease risk. I was wondering if any efforts were being undertaken by anyone that you know to look into those relationships and how fish consumption relates to disease risk later on in the long-term life.
So those, I mean, for the Anacostia, those efforts are just beginning now. We're writing proposals to try and develop that now. But there are other areas where they've done that work. They've done some of that work in New Jersey, for example, or that long-term health risk. So the data are there.
Okay.
And there are classic examples. Most of that was consumption of seafood containing mercury. So there's no doubt that health exposure causes risk. It's just a case of putting a number on it for this area.
Can you rate the levels that you found in fish from this area to levels that have been related to disease outcomes in other areas?
Yeah.
Thank you.
To what extent of progress, I would say progress, because I think the cleanup of the Anacostia has been going on for a while. To what extent can one see that progress based upon your toxicology reports, et cetera, et cetera?
There's still a whole lot to do. You know, we have the 6 Superfund site, and that's a big issue and a complex issue. There's a lot of, you know, now they're doing the sediment study at different depths to go like for an in-depth study of what's in there and what solutions. I mean, some people would say cap it or scoop out those. There's no clear solution, but they're looking into that at this moment. And also, you know, the DC Water is working on upgrading the sewer system, and that's a big one. That's a main source of a lot of nasty things. So, yeah, there's work, but you know, I mean, satisfactory progress won't come in, you know, decades from now. Yeah.
Well, let me try it again. It's dirty, then it's dirtier, and it was outright filth. Okay, so I think we started when we realized it was outright filth. Now, I would assume that maybe we are in a dirty stage, but quantitatively, in terms of the contributing factors to the Anacostia pollution, where are we?
The one thing that we do know, that when the bag bill was passed in DC, the number of plastic bags that we found in our cleanups have been reduced by about 65, maybe 70%. We are not seeing a whole lot of plastic bags when we go out on our cleanups now. And when I'm taking high school students into the tributaries, we rarely see plastic bags. We see styrofoam containers of all types and cups and so forth and straws, but we don't see a whole lot of bags now. So we know the bag bill has had an impact. And there was something else. We've also identified some dumping sites in Montgomery County and in Prince George's County. Professor Harriet Phelps over at UDC, she was at UDC at the time when she did this clam study, this freshwater clam study. And she identified the sites where the dumping was occurring, this chemicals was occurring. But and this was in the counties, nobody in the county took action on her study at the time. The counties and District of Columbia are just beginning to have this dialogue that we need to cooperate with one another in order to address this issue. She has the documentation, but it hasn't been acted upon yet, and nobody's been caught actually doing any illegal dumping. But she knows what it's about, the substance spots.
We also do water quality monitoring. I couldn't be able to tell you the particulars because I'm not the water quality expert, but I know that for some variety we measure fecal coliforms, water clarity, and others. Some get worse, some increase. There's some trends, or some remain steady. We have that report online. We launched it this year, the State of the River report, so you can find more information on that, on some of the progress. And also more anecdotically, our water quality specialist has an interesting story. When we started working a decade ago, we used to see more of what they call the fogs. It's kind of like this nasty waters come with fats, oils, and grease that comes from the sewage. And now those are rather relatively uncommon as they used to be 10 years ago because of all the policy and all the cleanup efforts going on. So again, some things increase, some things get better, others not so much. So. Yeah.
And I know that also the Federal City Council is undergoing something now where they're pushing for a decision about a way to go clean up the sediment by 2018, right? And they're going to assess who's responsible, I think, for a lot of the things that they find and hold those people accountable.
So to just take, look, you can go ahead since you haven't given us a question.
My name is Jed Miller. I'm from the Maryland Department of the Environment. I'm part of the team that develops and does outreach for our fish consumption advisories. I just want to thank all of you for your comments and your insight on all of this, and thank you for your example. And I hope to and look forward to continuing this dialogue in the future. So I just want to say thank you.
Thank you. Sir?
Relative to Maryland, has there been a similar study done of subsistence fishing in Baltimore, or the Baltimore area, similar to the one that was done on the Anacostia?
Trying to find someone to pay for it. I mean, we've gone to a range of different people, and it falls between the cracks. many cases, but exactly the same issues that you see in the Anacostia is going to be in urban Baltimore. In fact, some of the legacy contaminants in the Baltimore area are far worse than what the Anacostia has to offer.
Do we have any sense at all of the magnitude of subsistence involvement?
There have been studies that have been done on these sediments, but as far as like the type of work, I am not aware of anything that has been done in terms of looking at subsistence fishes.
I know that Baltimore Parks and people and the Baltimore Ecological Study are very much interested in doing some research project on the Patapsco watershed specifically. But so far, they just haven't come across the funding to do the study.
What kind of funding would that take?
And how much money you got?
It's one of those, so the question, I mean, it's a valid question, and the answer wasn't meant to be a facetious one. It depends what you're interested in showing. If you're interested in showing this is the number of people that fish, this is the number of times that they consume the food, the fish that they catch, it may not be high dollar, but it's a lot of effort because of the stories that Tony and Jorge told. Just contacting these people, gaining the trust that they're going to tell you what they're doing can take a long time. You start doing some of the chemistry where you're trying to quantify what they're being exposed to. You can run into it can cost us $5,000 to $10,000 a fish to go through and analyze the chemicals that are in it. So it's a very fluid answer because you need to define exactly what the question is. Right? What are you interested in?
Yeah. And the starting figure is about $350 to $400 per fish, and it goes up from there.
And also it depends on the scope of the people that you are using, the interviewers. Because with our project, we face the folks that were interviewers were mostly English and Spanish speaker, and again, like I said, they didn't even cover as well the area where a lot of the Latinos are, and even more that they didn't cover the people that speak Vietnamese and Chinese. And Tony and I have talked to several folks there, older, Vietnamese folks that don't speak any English, and we don't speak Vietnamese. So that's another thing. The more thorough you want to be, the more human resources you're going to need to do a good job for. Yeah.
We have our last question over there.
Okay. Two quick questions to Mr. Thomas. What were your findings that you shared with the fishermen when you gave out the park gift cards and showing the pictures and the toxicology results? What were your findings that you shared with the fishermen? And two, it was mentioned twice about some of these fish being sold at commercial markets. Do we know where these fish are being sold in this area?
I go to the wharf frequently, and when you go to the cleaning house, periodically you will see a bucket behind the counter on the floor with catfish in it. And I know that catfish came out of either the Potomac or the Anacostia River. And I have seen people purchase this catfish out of the bucket and walk out with it. Now I'm having these discussions with the managers of those barges, those fish markets down there, as to how we address this issue, because they're concerned because it reflects on the product that they sell. The information that I share with people and Jorge is that we're trying to get folks with explaining what the risks are, but we're not making a connection specifically with a disease or a condition. We're saying, listen, you can reduce the risk if you fish higher in the column of water. okay? Don't go after the bottom dwellers, because this is where all the problems are. But if you go after some of the other fish, you can hire in water column, then your chances of being exposed are, I won't say minimalized, but you know, it's reduced a bit. It's reduced a bit.
Yeah, actually, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has done more fish tissue samples, and they found even higher levels of pollutants in American eel and carp than in catfish.
Right.
And again, that's the importance of covering other demographics like Asians, because Latinos are not as prone as eating eel. That's more of an Asian thing, and also carp, Asians like what we have. So that's the importance of covering this demographic as well. These fish have a lot of crap.
All right, I'd just like to thank everyone for coming and thank our panel again.